Hi, Jenny. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Lauren.
Your career path from entry level to executive at Google and now as an author and a speaker is really incredible. Congratulations. I feel like we were just talking about this, but writing a book and adding author to your bio is such a milestone. So, and also a lot of hard work. But tell us about your background and your book, Wild Courage, and like why you felt like the world needed to have this book.
Yeah, well, by the time I started writing Wild Courage, I'd coached tens of thousands of executives, Googlers, non-Googlers, people in all from all walks of life on success, leadership, and influence. And the same theme kept coming up when people felt stuck, their relationship to fear, fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, and honestly, most interestingly, fear of judgment by others. And so these are smart, talented people, right? And it was fear getting in their way. And so I wanted to help. And I had an operations role at Google. I sat between sales and engineering. I helped drive billions in annual revenue. But I wanted to do something that gave back to the people who were feeling stuck at Google. So I started this program called Own Your Career, ended up getting used by tens of thousands of Googlers in nearly 100 countries. And then I was like, well, wait a second. I think that there's something here that I love to do. So I left Google to write this book. And it really is the process of feeling the fear and taking action anyway. And it's the set of tools to go after what you want and get it.
Okay, I'm really excited because you said one of my favorite words, tools. Because I feel like topics like this, you know it exists, you feel it, like you feel the imposter syndrome, the fear of something, but oftentimes that's kind of where it stops. So the fact that you're like, I'm going to give you some actionable tools to work through this,
Yeah.
is my favorite thing. I'm kind of curious too, when you were, looking back in your career, like what did you do differently to stay promotable at every stage, or at least maybe even if people aren't looking for the promotion, just sort of like growing their career.
Yeah, I avoided nap work. So, nap work is not actually promotable work. And there are things that you can do on any given day. Well, essentially, I should say, this is like saying yes to the big and no to the small. That is what I would call, well, Wild Courage covers 9 traits that sound a little terrifying, but really can help supercharge your success. Those traits are weird, selfish, shameless, nosy, obsessed, manipulative, brutal, reckless, and bossy. So, and they're all tongue in cheek. So, selfish, I would say, be selfish about what you do in your 40 or 60 hours you're working each week. So say yes to the big, the 2026 big strategy project, increasing customer satisfaction by 12% year over year. Those are big things. Say no to the small. Small is being the 18th person to reply all on the happy birthday Lauren email. I'll give you a high five when I see you in the hall. Small is going to every single meeting where you neither add value nor derive value. And another thing that's small is what I call nap work, not actually promotable. So what is that? That is kind of invisible work, glue work, some people call it, where being on the well-being pillar or planning the company offsite or planning the picnic or organizing the share drive or being on every committee. And this oftentimes falls on women. And it's not bad to do this stuff, right? It is, you want some of it because it builds community, it's good for the organization, it's fun. But if you are more than 15% nap work, just be mindful that's not the shit that's going to get you promoted. Ooh, I don't know what the rating is here. That's not the stuff that's going to get you promoted.
That's okay. I think this is a really valuable piece of advice and one that really asks people to say, okay, look back on the last week that your last week, and have any of your items been nap work. And oftentimes I feel like you don't intentionally try to have nap work. It just sort of happens, maybe because you got asked. Like I know for a fact, like I was asked to plan a dinner and I did that. And it was like, and I'm kind of curious, like, okay, let's say you recognize something like that. You're like, that does not work. Like, I'm not getting promoted because I planned this dinner for 15 people, but it took time to do it. How do
Sure
I
did.
say no to a boss who asks you to do those things?
Yeah, well, first is you have to be mindful, are you working on the big stuff? And how do you find out what the big stuff is? You talk to your boss and ask what's most important to them. Like, how are they getting graded for their annual review, right? You read your VP's bi-weekly newsletter and like, yes, it's long and yes, it's something that you don't have to read, but read it so that you know what the key projects are. Then assign yourself to those projects. So, or, raise your hand and say you want to work on them. So then when you get asked to do the 15-person dinner or whatever it is, you can go to your manager and say, I could do this, but it's going to take my time away from working on the 2026 strategy project. Is that an okay trade-off? The other thing you can do is, that was fun. Now I'm doing this. That was fun means that was fun doing it last year. I had a great time planning the company offsite last year. Now I'm going to let somebody else enjoy that task this year. But I think, those are two strategies. A third strategy is simply being comfortable with silence. When you're in a room of 12 peers, and this happened to me, my manager said, okay, so we need someone new to lead the DEI pillar. Now, I have done a ton of DEI work at Google, but at this particular juncture where I was trying to get promoted, it no longer made sense for me and where I spent my time because, like you said, it takes time to, lead the DEI pillar. It takes time to plan the 15-person dinner. So I literally sat on my hands. I literally physically put my hands under my tush and sat on them so that I wouldn't raise my hand, even though it was very uncomfortable to not raise my hand. And I was one of the few women in that room. And so I almost felt like, well, everyone's kind of people were physically looking at me. Their eyes were on me, waiting for me to
It's
say,
so
oh, yeah, I
uncomfortable.
can continue. And I just sat there on my hands and said nothing. And so part of it is, how do you handle this with priorities with your boss? Part of it is like, how do you handle it internally within your own body to say, I'm going to sit here in the discomfort and I'm going to let somebody else raise their hand because I did it last year.
Yeah. So part of this strategy is like recognizing what is nap work, being mindful about also not volunteering for it and not putting, not getting uncomfortable with the silence and saying, okay, I'll do it. Yes, I'm very good at that. I'm like, I will out silent treatment this room, and
And
then also go on.
it's probably why you've been so successful because the most successful people are very discerning about what they do and what they don't do. That's strategy. Oftentimes women get this feedback and it makes me cringe. You're not strategic enough. You're too much of a doer. You're good at execution. We need you to be more strategic. Strategy is simply what are you going to do and what are you not going to do? What is the business going to do and what is the business not going to do? It breaks my heart when women get that feedback because I think it's coded language, but women are so strategic. Think about all the balls we have, that we're juggling every day, like with our families, with our partners, at work, with our friends. And so we're really strategic. We just have to show at work that we're strategic. And that is saying no to things. Like that actually shows strategy. The leaders that I admire the most are incredibly strategic at saying no. Like when someone texts me, sorry, I can't participate, I'm always like, oh, you're such a badass because you said no. So just know that people might see you that way. They're not going to think you're a jerk for saying no. And by the way, I do have a free resource on this. It's at itsjennywood.com/say no, because it's hard for people to build this muscle, but there are a lot of tactical things you can do to do it, a lot of easy tools.
Yeah, I was gonna say the people who are like very good at saying no without actually using the word no, I really admire them. Like
Yeah,
every once in a while you'll see like these memes on Instagram about a person who, and they'll reshare it. And so it's great that you have a resource. We'll put that in the show notes. I also sometimes will just ask ChatGPT. Like I had to write a response to my daughter's preschool teacher, and I asked
mm,
ChatGPT to rewrite it in a
great.
nicer, more empathetic way. Wow. Like I was like, clearly you need to do all my writing from now on,
It's
which
amazing. Yeah,
that's scary thing. But
it's
I guess
amazing.
I want people to know like there are tools. If this is uncomfortable for you, it is a muscle that you build over time. And to your point, like you also will train people to start to be like, we don't ask Jenny to do this thing because we know she's going to say no. Like I think all of this is very interesting just from like once you start doing it, you'll have to probably do less of it, you
You
know?
build you build a reputation. You build a reputation
Yeah.
of doing the high leverage, promotable, strategic work, and that's what people admire. And that's when they say, "Ooh, put this kid in charge. There's a future leader right in front of us."
Yeah, and it's like, what's the worst they're gonna say? Oh, she only does promotable work. She only does the work that's really important. Like, if that's the insult of, oh, she's so difficult, she only wants to do the stuff that's high impact, it's okay. I think
And
people get that.
you know what? Let's talk about the repercussions because after that meeting where I sat in my hands, my manager did pull me aside and like in our next one-on-one, she's like, "I was surprised that you didn't raise your hand for that." And so I did get a wrist slap. Like I just
Yeah.
want people listening to know that like sometimes it's not going to go well. But that was in my 18 years at Google, that was the only time I'd gotten a wrist slap for doing that. And she was mad at me for other things anyway. So I think she was just looking for excuses to say like I wasn't being a team player. But like sometimes you just have to be considered not the team player because my guess is that you are the team player in so many other ways and so many other scenarios on so many other projects. And I probably just shocked her in that moment by like finally making the pivot to not do it.
Yeah, oh, totally. I'm curious too, like in the repercussions, thinking about that, do you think it would be helpful like to keep a running list of the times when you are a team player? Like, I don't want to get too deep in the thoughts, but like I do, again, very strategic. I'm like, what are they going to come at you with if you're not quote a team player? And by not being a team player, I mean by not doing this non-promotable work. So I think it's always important to be keeping a running list of the like strategic, high level work, the wins, the impactful stuff. So if someone says to you, you're not a team player, you can say, I didn't volunteer to plan that dinner, but here are the five other high priority items that I have been working on, or something like that.
Yeah, and I would even take it a step farther. I call this the Monday Manifesto. So this is a 15-minute email you can send to your boss, and it has two things that you're proud of that you worked on last week and two things you're excited to work on this week. Four bullets, no more than 15 minutes, 15 minutes. That's why I call it a manifesto, not a manifesto. And this isn't a performance report. It's just keeping them in the loop of what you
Yeah,
have going on because even just the bias of them seeing that every Monday, they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not going to ping Jenny and ask her to do this small
totally.
thing because like she's clearly working on some pretty cool stuff." And in those four bullets, you can even supercharge it. And this would fall under shameless, which I call finding your swagger and having, audacity or the pride to really it's self-promotion tastefully, but it's kicking the feeling like you're bragging to the curb, kicking that you feel like you're boasting to the curb, and getting over the imposter syndrome by sharing what you're working on. And so in those four bullets, rather than something as simple as like, oh, I made some progress on, the competitive analysis, use numbers. I'm 70% through my competitive analysis on user retention. I'm proud I improved the customer sign up process from 3 steps to 2. Your numbers don't have to be fancy, like
Yeah.
15 million year over year revenue growth, right? 3 steps to 2. That's meaningful. 70% of the way through. Well, if my boss reads that, then they're going to think, well, she's still got 30% of the way to go. I better keep her focused on that this week. So the more you can use numbers, even if they seem like they're kind of basic numbers, the better off you're going to be because then you're showing your impact.
Right. Oh, 100%. And I also feel like, to your point, if you're doing that on a weekly basis, then one, they're probably not going to ask you because they have it in their inbox. And then two, you do have a running list, right? Like
Yeah.
how, wherever you're doing this, whether it's like, for example, at our company, we use like one of our products, our app suite, we put it in every single week. It like
Yeah.
pings you, which I love because I feel like it's even less cringy, bragging feeling, because
Yeah.
everyone's doing it. But more importantly, my point being is like you have a paper trail now if they ask you, right?
Which also makes it a lot easier to write your quarterly review or your share your quarterly bullets with your boss, which I highly recommend doing, even if it's not part of your system at work. Like, even if your work is set up that you get a report back from your manager every quarter and they just decide, what you're working on and they base it on, or they evaluate you what they perceive you're working on and they base it on your weekly one-on-one with them, send them a quarterly bullet list that's segmented in a smart way of, operational impact, business impact, team impact, and just send it to them. And it can just be an amalgamation of this Monday manifesto. But the number of people who did not send this Monday manifesto to me while I was an exec at Google is staggering, probably like
Yeah.
90%. Harry sent it to me, Annabelle sent it to me, Phil sent it to me. These are actual people with actual names. And they were the rock stars. They were the ones that got promoted so much faster, probably 60% faster than other direct reports, just because they were proactively telling me what they were doing. And again, I call it shameless because nothing makes me cringe more than walking into a meeting and someone saying, I've got a shameless plug, but I put together this spreadsheet and you might find it useful. And then this happened once. People were like, oh my gosh, this is going to save us 30 minutes every time we have to do this product launch analysis. And they're like, why? Like, why did we not know about this? And yet this person felt the need to say this is a shameless plug. What's the shame in it? That's why shameless is one of the 9 traits. It's about kicking that imposter syndrome to the curb.
Yeah, I'm noticing in a lot of what you're saying, it's like the words you use matter, right? So saying shameless plug when you're like, what's wrong with being shameless? Saying no when you're it's like, what's wrong with saying no? So a lot of these I also feel like are like personal hurdles that you have to just kind of get comfortable with.
Yeah.
And what's interesting? I'm in a stage in my career where my manager is basically saying to me, like, I need the story. Like, if I'm going to put you forward for a promotion, for example, they're like, give me the story. And so what I find too with this is like, you are more likely to get promoted because the story is there. Like when you were telling me that, I was like, oh my God, feed all that stuff to Chat GPT. Be like, help me write a quarterly thing. Obviously, you guys don't need to take it word for word. It's not that literal, but like get a first draft, get a second draft, get a third draft, and do it. Like with AI, all this can be done in literally seconds,
Seconds.
especially if you've been keeping that paper trail. And to your point, like you're able to tell the story. So then your manager can tell the story, right?
But here's what can't be done with AI: overcoming the fear of recognizing that you deserve to tell the story, that you can be selfish in asking to be promoted, that you can be what I call manipulative, which is the courage to build relationships through empathy and to influence and to meet your boss's boss and to meet your
Yep.
boss's peers and build a relationship with them. That's what AI cannot do. And I think going back to like the biggest blocker for Googlers I experienced was fear. And so I agree. And once people overcome that, they deserve the promotion, right? You know, when I think about being selfish, I share this example of Claire Torrey. She was a session singer for Pink Floyd in the UK and on the Great Gig in the Sky, that song. And she this is a tool I called Play to Win, What I Need Now. And it's selfish, but she walked in, she did her a session singer, someone who comes in and does vocals for 30 minutes on a song. She got paid 30 quid, 30 pounds. And then she left. And then, years later, she sees the album goes 14 times platinum. The Pink Floyd's making like a bazillion dollars off of this. And so what she needed then, right, what I need now, she played to win. And she, meaning WINN, and she sued them and she said, I deserve a songwriting credit and a percent of the royalties. And they settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. But like, think about it. What you need now is to get promoted. What you need now is a different title or a raise because two people on your team got laid off and you're now doing the work of three people. What you need now is to, write the story because your manager is not some wizard behind the curtain with all the answers. And however much you have on your plate, they have 7 times as much on their plate if they have 7 direct reports plus what they're doing. So 8 times as much on their plate. So yes, the onus is on you to tell the story. No one's going to come to you with a crown on a platter and say it's time for you to get promoted. Like
Right.
I promoted the squeaky wheels. I mean, like it or not, people that might be really controversial, but like there were so many talented people on my team. The people who were vocal, the people who told their story to me, the people who were proactive, the people who I could honestly easily and quickly without it taking a ton of my time get through the promotion committee are the ones that I wanted to put at the front of the line. So make it easy for your manager and know your superpowers, right? Know your
Yeah.
power assets. These are the three things that you really are good at that have business impact. And a lot of people don't know those. Like if I said to the average, employee at a tech company or a finance company or a pharmaceutical company, what are your three power assets? And I say this because I coach a lot of people. They either say, well, these are the 100 things I'm good at, or they like can't think of one. So take time to write them down, have two business skills and one personal skill or one soft skill. Um, and together these make your power portfolio. And so I think that's critical too. And we can talk about sort of what a good versus bad version of that looks like.
Yeah, can we? Because I'm thinking, like, what are examples of power assets?
Yeah.
What is this? Yeah, yeah. So tell me.
Okay. So I had a mentee, Martina, and she was phenomenally talented. And I said, what are your three power assets? And she said, communication, organization, and supporting others on launches. And I was like, Martina, you are top talent. You're like top 2% talent at Google. Those are all, they sound very feminine, by the way, communication, organization, and supporting others. They sound very soft. They're all people skills. So we kind of workshopped them and we came up with executive communication, which is a totally different vibe than simply communication.
Right.
That indicates like you're writing comms, you're influencing stakeholders. So executive communication was what we did out of communication. Organization became project and program management. Now I'm thinking McKinsey strategist. Now I'm thinking Gantt charts. Now I'm thinking process. So project and program communication and supporting others on launches became go-to-market strategy, which she was so good at. And again, that's like analyzing risk and
Yeah.
it's understanding market readiness, it's understanding addressable market, it's on all these, fancy words. But like the reality is what moves the business is what moves your career. So if you can communicate your wins in a way that shows that you're moving the business just by changing the language, right? So we moved her to 2 business skills and 1 people skill versus 3 soft skills, 3 people skills. And you got to have that mix, especially for women who I think default to, oh, I'm good at the support, I'm good at the organizing, I'm good at, getting people excited. Oftentimes people say their superpowers are, or their power assets are adjectives like I'm fun, I'm collaborative, I'm easy to work with. Like, no, those are not business skills.
Right. I really like that. And I'm curious for someone who maybe doesn't have a manager who's going to workshop it with them, like
Hmm.
what's the resource? So like I'm listening to this, I'm like, this is so important. I also could understand someone who's like, it's a little overwhelming to be sort of
Hmm.
like constantly being proactively driving my career while I'm also working and parenting, whatever, all the things.
Yeah.
Is this where you encourage people to find mentors, to find peers they can do this with, to hold each other accountable, like find a career coach? Like who are the resources that can help you with this also?
Yeah, so I think mentors and sponsors are amazing. So the difference between a mentor and a sponsor is a mentor talks to you, a sponsor talks about you behind closed doors to other people of influence when it matters, when promotions are being decided. Or forget that because that's way down the line. When work is being decided about who's going to take on the big projects, right? Again, say yes to the big, say no to the small. So the best mentors are your boss's boss or your boss's peers. So your boss's boss, I kind of alluded to this already. That's what I call managing higher. We all know about managing up. That's old news, right? Everyone's making a good relationship with their boss. You want to have a good relationship with your boss's boss. That's managing higher. You want to have relationships with your boss's peers. I call that managing diagonally. If you think about your manager on an org chart is above you, their peers are to the left and right. So managing diagonally is building those relationships. Let's say your manager has 7 peers. Let's be real. Not all of them are going to have the same level of influence. Some are actually golfing buddies with the VP. Some got there because it was a fluke and they got reorged and they got lucky. Some got there because they're really freaking talented and they actually are listened to because, part of what I talk about in the manipulative trait is, influence is not created equal and you can influence differently based on how people perceive you. You know at your company who the higher ups are, who you really respect, and the ones that everyone's like, okay, that's kind of they're kind of a dud. So find the ones who people respect. Don't befriend 7 out of 7 of your boss's peers. Pick 2 who have the influence, and then also intersect with who you like, who you enjoy, who you want to spend time with. And then bring them ideas, bring them projects they're working on. Ask if you can participate on, something their team is working on. Ask if you can mentor someone on their team who's new. Ask if you can, if your projects are overlapping with anything their team is doing, and can you collaborate? So I'm really big on managing higher and managing diagonally as a way to keep yourself accountable and to get kind of a neutral third party perspective from someone who's not your boss, which it can be stressful. Like not everybody's relationship with their boss is great.
Yeah, I think too, it's interesting being back at like a large company, building relationships is, I don't want to say 90%, but it's probably like 85 to 90% of like how things get done. Like I feel like I'm just constantly following the breadcrumb too. Like if I'm trying to collaborate with someone, I'm like, okay, you did this, but who's the real person who does this? And then, and you're just like moving around. And then to your point, trying to diagonally influence and build relationships, but through the other relationships that you built, you know what I mean? It's really fascinating to be back at, for me at least, to be back at a big company where there is so much like internal networking that can happen within a company too, and you
It's
are trying to be
massive.
strategic about it. Yeah.
It's massive. I have a bunch of illustrations that were created for the book, and one of them says it's a column on the left side. It says what you think, how you think people are succeed, or something like that, and it just has a column of hard work. And on the right side, it's how people are actually successful or how you actually succeed, and it's like a sliver of hard work, and then it's like managing up. People, understanding what you're working on,
Totally.
saying no, building relationships, navigating the politics. And again, that's all the stuff I would put in under manipulative, which is,
Yeah.
whether you're selling a product, an idea, or yourself, your ability to win friends, allies, and supporters is all about mutual benefit. So go figure out what other people want and get it for them, and they'll be excited to support you too.
Yeah, I also was given the advice early on, like when you're working on something, instead of like going to them being like, I want to do this, are you in? It's like, can we work? Like, what are you trying to solve? Maybe we can find a solution together. Like, even if you have the idea in mind, you're like trying to get them to buy in through, also being on board with it. So,
Oh, this is a huge part of manipulative. This is the IKEA effect. There's research on this where 2 groups were divided. One was told to put an IKEA box together, and one was given the IKEA box. After the group put it together, the groups came back and they had a chance to sell the box to the organizers. The groups that put it together sold their box for 60% higher because they felt more ownership over it. It was their blood, sweat, and tears. They had their mark on it, so they valued it more. So if you ask your boss to co-create something with you, maybe you get a proposal 80% of the way there. You open up a doc, you write down your kind of chicken scratches, you get it 80% of the way 80% of the way there. Go to somebody who is higher up and influential and ask them to help you take it over the line the last 20%. Because of the IKEA effect, because they're helping build that IKEA box, they will value it more, and they'll be more likely to promote the project, more likely to give you time in a leads meeting, more likely to talk about it with their peers. They immediately feel pride in it. So people need to weigh in to buy in. It's a super strategic way to get people on board with your initiatives.
I love that. Okay, as we kind of close up, I'm curious, I want to end with some actionable steps. So, what is
Great.
one small step our listeners can take this week to refocus on promotable, high impact work if you had to narrow it down to one?
Well, I have a tool called Woo with You, which is about how you can influence more over email. Because, if you want people to support your project, or you want to, be the person to present in the client meeting, or you want a customer to, you want to upsell them and you want them to spend more money with you, all of that leads to business impact. And so the way to do that over email is Woo with You. Count how many of your sentences start with the word I, and count how many of your sentences start with the word you, and try to shift at least 50% of them to you. So Annabelle, somebody on my team, she came after we did a training for a client, and her first draft to the client was, "I had so much fun doing this training with you. I would love to walk you through some other products, because we knew that if we walked them through other products, we might upsell them on those other products. I would love to know if you have time. I thought your team was great." And then she's like, "Jenny, look how I switched these all to you. Your team was amazing to partner with. You are such a great leader that you created such an environment that I could come in and train your team. Your team might benefit from understanding these other products. When would work for them to blah, blah, blah." So, like, that's Woo with You. And I just think it's such a high impact way to increase your business leverage and to get people to say yes to you, whether it's an internal stakeholder, your boss, your VP, or a customer.
Wow, I've never heard that before, and I feel like quick, easy fix, totally like amazing ROI potential from that
Yeah.
too.
And
Um,
ChatGPT can do it for you.
I was gonna say, and of course, AI will help you with that too. I know I'm going off on the AI ledge big time, but
Me too.
I'm also one of the things I find is that it you should use it as like your partner in your career. Like I was asking you about resources, and it's like let AI be the first line of defense to like help you, spar with you, give you feedback on things. Like it's always available, and it's not going to judge you for any weird thing that you say.
Not at all. And my favorite thing with AI is to change the tone. Can you make this sassier? Can you make this
Yeah.
more thoughtful? Can you make this more empathetic, right? Sassier if I'm writing my newsletter, and I like to have a sassy vibe. More empathetic if I'm trying to say no to somebody, like you were using the example before.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Jenny Wood, your book is called Wild Courage. I'll put that in the show notes, but tell everyone where they can learn more about you, follow your work. I mean, this is incredible advice, so we're going to need more.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I have a newsletter that people can sign up for. It's jennywood.com/newsletter. I do keynotes and one-on-one coaching and executive coaching, and I'm probably going to be putting together a small group, um, community for women leaders. And so these are all things that you can get in touch with me about you can just email me, jenny@itsjennywood.com. Throw an email in my box. I'd love to hear from
Amazing.
you.
We will. We really love that. And thank you so much for your time today. This has been incredible.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.